Hey guys, VaulSC here. Today we're going to cover a topic of discussion in infiNity, a news item if you like to put it that way, and it's going to be all about forming fire teams and the rules surrounding that, wildcards, some of the new changes. I know that normally I do either a battle report or a sectorial review or something like that, but occasionally I do a bit of a rant about a current event in infiNity or a piece of news or a particular topic, and this is going to be one of those videos. So, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to begin by going over a bit of old theory, stuff that I've rehashed a million times before, just for the sake of newer players, people who are unfamiliar with the context and the background, to just quickly get you up to speed. Then I'm going to be covering a few of the forum topics that have come out recently and some of the discussions and opinions of other people. And I hope to end the video by going over some of my own thoughts and sharing my ideas about how fire teams, in particular the special fire teams and the special rules surrounding them, ought to work, and how infiNity, could be a better game with, maybe a different direction in certain ways. So should we just launch into it? Right, so fire teams, especially fire team core, let's just revisit a little bit of theory, and I know I've done this to death, so sorry to those people who have watched a lot of my videos and know this already, but for those of you who are a little bit less experienced, the idea of a big fire team core of 5 members is that only one of your troopers, your point man, your link leader in some cases, is going to be able to shoot at a time when it's your active turn. So you spend your order, you move out with your active 5 guys, you pick one guy, and that particular guy is the one getting the benefit at that point in time of the +1 burst bonus, of 6th Sense level 2, of the +3 ballistic skill, that's the big one. The rest of the fire team members are just cheerleaders, waving the pom-poms, providing, that goodwill, playing the guitars in the background like balladeers, while your point man goes on a rampage. Also, when you're reacting, yes, it's true that everybody can shoot, but it's a really, really bad idea to have, several members of your fire team exposed and facing the enemy at any one given time, because your opponent can just isolate one of them and pick on the weakest member of the link, shoot that, the fire team bonus is reduced to a 4-man link, they shoot the next guy, it comes down to a 3-man link, and that's a really good way of losing games, and experienced players will know that. So what you do is, if you're going to ARO at all, if you're going to expose anybody, you just pick the strongest member, the guy with the biggest guns, the best stats, all of that thing, to soak up all of the fire team abilities, the plus burst, the 6th Sense level 2, +3 ballistic skill, and use that person to defend with, right? Because of all of that, because that's how fire teams work, when you're designing your fire team, you want to make sure that the model that you put in your list who's going to be doing the shooting in the active turn has the best gun, has the best stats, has the best everything it can, because that's the one actually using the abilities, that's the one that you're going to be relying on for your win or your loss. And you need to make it count. So the more points you can spend on that model, the better. I mean, you're going to break the bank on that one guy, because that's going to be the guy participating in the face-to-face roles. Similarly with defense, if you've got one member of your link team holding the sniper rifle or the missile launcher and being that defensive person while everybody hides in total cover, you want that guy to be as strong as possible. So now that we've understood all of that, let's move on to the next point, which is that for the longest time, fire teams have generally been about, like, there are exceptions, but generally when they first came out, it was about a group of models of a particular type forming a link team. So you've got a group of Fusiliers, you have 5 Fusiliers, and nobody else can join that link team, it's for them. Or a group of whatever else it may be, military order knights, or Morat vanguards, or whatever it might be. Now, we started seeing things like the Diafos being able to sub into the teams and adding in that specialized role, and that's something which made fire teams a little bit more impressive. And then we started to see more exceptions, like for example, when I started playing Imperial Service the first time, seeing that you could have a group of Celestial Guards with a Crane rank added to it with a Spitfire, and therefore you have a heavy infantry model of getting those bonuses, and that started to become a bit more and more interesting and powerful. And then over the last couple of years, we've started to see the link team options get more and more diverse and more interesting and more powerful as a result. Just pause on that thought. Let's say you're playing good old Nomads and you decided to pick up the Corregidor sectorial, and you're looking at the fire teams available in this sectorial, and you're going, okay, Corregidor Alguaciles, never get the pronunciation right on that. Let's say you take 5 of those guys, you give one guy the HMG, one guy the missile launcher. It's a nice cheap link team. They provide 5 regular orders. You can win games with that link team. Their firepower is decent. It's not the best, especially compared to the other stuff out there, but for their points, it's a really good team. Then if you go over to the Mobile Brigadas, they can also form a fire team core of 5 of them. Now, if you buy 5 of them, it's a very, very expensive link team, but hey, your bliss skill's 16, you've got a group of them, you've got, the power of 16 level 2 and the extra bliss skill, and that's the kind of link team that is expensive. It's not the best thing in the game, but you can win with it, and it's quite powerful and quite ball-busting in some ways. But then, if you think of it, I mean, that's how it used to be anyway in Corregidor, those were your options. But if you think of the third option here, well, the third option that I'm going to present, of course there are more options. Let's say you take 4 Alguaciles and a single Mobile Brigada with an HMG, for example, or a missile launcher. Then you're still keeping the cost of your link team really, really low. But your point man, as we discussed earlier, the guy who's actually using the abilities to attack, the one participating in the face-to-face role, has all of those buffs, and a single Mobile Brigada is obviously better than a single Alguacile, so you're just doing the same thing so much more efficiently. So in our first example where the Alguaciles are rolling out, they've got a particular point man for not many more points, really able to crush things as a big wrecking ball at the front of your unit. Or the defensive version, you hide all the Alguaciles in cover, and the Mobile Brigada with a missile launcher is the one being the aero piece, and trust me, is a really, really rock solid piece. Now this wasn't always possible. This got added to infiNity more recently, where you can actually mix and match some of your link teams like that, and it's caught on. It's obviously very powerful. The better players do make use of that. And just like in other games, for example, an analogy, this is going to be a terrible analogy, but collectible card games where you've got something which cheats on resources, where you play this one card that you were going to play anyway, and it gives you a discount to this other card that you were going to play anyway. Of course, you're going to combine that and use that as much as possible. And in spirit, I feel like the similar sort of thing goes on here, where you still need the cheerleaders to be in your army. They were just going to be sitting around anyway, and you still need to take a rock-solid heavy infantry guy to do the shooting with and kill people with, and you were going to take one anyway, and now you've got the best of both worlds, but you're not spending any more points for it. So that's significant, and we are going to revisit that in this discussion. But again, just want to cool down. Sorry for going through all of this theory for people who already know this stuff. Let's move on to the newer issue, which is the whole thing about wildcards and models that count as other models for the purposes of joining link teams, and models that have a specific rule where they don't count as something else, but they can join in with a particular type of unit. So Corvus Belli has started to make the game, in terms of the formation of link teams, a bit more complicated, a bit more interesting, a bit more diverse, and there are some good and bad things with that. You guys might remember me doing a video describing Deshat Company and reviewing them and breaking down the sectorial. And one thing that people pulled me up on is that I can't quite remember this 100%, but I think I remember saying something like, okay, if you play Deshat, you can make this really cool link team that involves bounty hunters, because they are able to be part of any fire team in the sectorial army as a wildcard trooper, and you can join them up with Zuyongs, and because you want to really not take that many Zuyongs, you might just want to take the HMG tactical awareness guy or the deflector guy, and then add a Rouge Shi to that, because the Rouge Shi can join a Zuyong Invincibles team. And I think in my video I made mention of the fact that you kind of need a Zuyong in there, otherwise there's no Zuyong link team for the other people to join. But I remember people shooting me down on that, saying, hey dude, actually it's even more lenient than that. If you want to, you can pretend that there's a imaginary Zuyong link team, and the bounty hunters simply join it, and the Rouge Shi can be added to that. So you've got a Rouge Shi, and you take 4 bounty hunters and give them whatever guns you want, and they're basically part of a Zuyong link team, even though there are no Zuyongs in there. And people were telling me, hey, that's actually totally legal. And intuitively, it didn't feel like it should be legal. But there was this thread here by IJW, also known as Ian Wood. This is a guy in the community who I've always seen as like a bit of a middleman between us and Corvus Belli, since he's got some responsibilities with the wiki, but is not strictly, a representative directly of the company. Anyway, the guy is kind of well known because he's quite passionate about getting the rules situation right and participates in a lot of rules forum threads. Anyway, so this became the definitive way of playing it, and he sort of spells out everything about Fireteam creation, and mentioned, at the time that you could, in fact, do this trick, really, where a whole bunch of, wildcard units could team up and be whatever they wanted without needing, the link team that they're meant to be joining to be present in the form of at least one member of it. So that happened, and as a result, there are a lot of people sort of thinking about how they design lists with that particular freedom. So, thinking about, would you want to do this, would you want to do that? Now, just take a step back for a moment. Most people were still in agreement, and I would have said this as well, that you probably still want to include a Zuyong anyway in this particular example, but we may be able to find other examples elsewhere in Army 6 where, it would be beneficial to just team up all of your wildcards without them actually joining any, specific model that was able to form a Fireteam core in the first place. So, more recently than that, though, and this is mainly the thing that's prompted this video, is that our buddy Hakiman Taro has posted a comment in the rules on the Corvus Belli forums. By the way, this is a guy who's actually part of our Discord community, and he was actually playing infiNity with me on Tabletop Simulator a while back. Good guy, but he has posted a comment here that basically says that in Mayacast, obviously the popular and well-known podcast, they were talking to Gutierre, who is, a designer at infiNity, and he actually had come out publicly and stated that if you're going to add these wildcards to a particular team, you have to have at least one model who actually is meant to be part of that team originally, for them to latch onto and join onto. So that you can't do the whole 4 bounty hunter wildcards plus the Rushi, for example. You've got to have a Zuyong. So that led to some confusion, and this has happened before. You've got the community thinking the rules are played this way, and with a reading of the rules, you'd think that this is the interpretation. Then a Corvus Belli employee or designer says something, maybe offhandedly, in a public place, in a public forum, that runs counter to that. People are scratching their heads and are thrown into a state of confusion about what the situation is. I think somebody ended up pointing out that, Zurath, pointing out that with a completely different ruling, like a while back with tactical awareness, we also had a situation where the same guy went and made a comment that despite what you guys think, the rules played this way, and then the company in general officially put out an errata or FAQ which ruled it the complete other way, which says to us, okay, maybe we shouldn't just be, playing the rules and making rules decisions and interpretations and basing our tournaments around stuff that their employees say offhandedly at random without, explicitly and formally communicating it to everyone. So that became discussed, and I think that people have a really good point there. So this thread goes on, and people are wondering about it. And what happens partway through this is that we have Hellois, who's another Corvus Belli employee. By the way, Hellois has actually commented on my videos in the past, and I know that he does watch some of my stuff. So if you're watching, stick around. I want to talk to you, so don't go away. We're gonna have words, but. Back to the story. So Hellois comes along and he makes a post that says, when creating a fireteam core that includes wildcard troopers, you must include at least one trooper from one of those units listed for that fireteam in the sectorial chart, or a trooper who counts as one of those units, which is sort of backing up, Buddy Gutierre there, and, running contrary to what people were saying about IJW's Ian Wood's thread, that in fact, yes, if you do want to add some bounty hunters to participate in a Zuyong Corps, and if your Rushi wants to join a Zuyong team, you do have to have at least one Zuyong. So you make your list up here. I still think I've got my camera in the way, so let's just minimize it for a second. So let's say, let's look at my favorite list. So HMG Tactical Awareness, bam. We've got a Zuyong link now, so we can join it with a Rushi. And although there's only one Zuyong there, and we need to have a link, these bounty hunters are going to be part of a fire team, basically padding out the numbers. So now you've got the Zuyong there, link team, and the Rushi joins it, the bounty hunters join it. So you can't have the situation where you completely drop the Zuyong and pretend that the bounty hunters are Rushis, because the bounty hunters are joining the team, they're not counting as Zuyong. So there you go, rules query has been answered by HelloUS here. Now immediately some people have been pointing out, okay, you've made a comment there, and not a lot has gone into that comment. It's just basically a few lines of text, by an official spokesperson for CB. And how does that count for other things? We've got some discussion here about, well, does that just count for Zuyongs which can make a fire team core, or how does it work for special fire teams, for example? If we go over to Ariadna, we go to Tartary Army Corps, go over to Frontovix, and it says here, special fire team, you can make 4 line Kazakhs and 1 Frontovix. So for example, you take your 4 Frontovix, and again, my screen's all over the place, so just minimize this. Let's say we've got 4 Frontovix and a 112. Note that the 112 Doctor can't form a fire team core. He can just be part of a special fire team. So you've got your 4 Frontovix and your 112. But then if you come over to veteran Kazakhs, what you can do here is that you can wildcard them into any fire team, so they can join any fire team. So if we sub in a veteran Kazakh here, take out a Frontovic, in fact you can just keep going and then sub in the veteran Kazakhs and put a 112. So effectively you're talking about a Frontovic core without any Frontovics in it. And what we're saying here in this thread is that the people are saying, well, hey, just responding in that way doesn't clarify everything. It just, points towards a clarification, and that kind of communication isn't really enough. Let's just slow down for a sec and just step back for a moment and say, why does this matter? Why is this important? Well, I think one way in which it is important is that, you're defining, or at least limiting, or contributing to the way that people experience their hobby and their games. You can think of people right now who are in the process of organizing tournaments where dozens of people, maybe even like 100 people are going to come to your tournament, and you're collecting payments for fees, and you're organizing prize support stuff, and you're working out venue stuff, and you're getting people's lists in, and you're making rules calls and things like that. And people are going to be asking you, hey, there's this unresolved rules question, how are you going to rule it for this tournament? And that's a big deal. People put a lot into events like that and so forth. So this kind of thing does actually matter. And say you're a player who plans on going to one of these events with 4 bounty hunters and a Rushi, or Frontovics that don't actually have any Frontovics because you've got Kazakhs and veteran Kazakhs and a 112 Doctor. I'm not saying that there are that many people out there planning on actually doing that, but even if there was only just a couple of people, this kind of really matters, and it's good to have clear set of rules that everybody can play by. So I think that's actually quite a big deal, and a lot of people keep pointing that out. In fact, you've got fairly well-known members of the community, pointing out to our friend HelloUS here that, thanks for dropping in and giving us that little ruling, but it's not enough to just haphazardly make a comment. You really need, something comprehensive which is going to deal with the entire issue, so that there is no doubt, there's no loopholes sitting around or anything like that. So at the current time of me recording this video, that particular thread's like bowled out to about 9 pages. And since then, Ian Wood has come back and actually updated the wiki, as we can see here. So good on him for doing that. The Frontovics and 112s thing got clarified. So we're basically treating special fire teams as, let's have a look. For the 112, special fire team core up to 4 Frontovics and 1 Doctor. You start with the frontifix and a 112. The veteran Kazakhs replace all the frontifix, but the 112 is still included. So what's being said there is that even though the 112 isn't something that can create a fireteam core, it's at least one of the members of the special fireteam that you're trying to join. So if you've got 4 frontifix and a single 112, the veteran Kazakhs can replace any of them, but not all of them, right? So you can leave one frontifix there and the Kazakhs can replace the 112s, or you can take all but the 112 out and the veteran Kazakhs can replace that. And the logic behind there is sound. Like, I can see it, I can understand it. But it took us a while to get to that point, and the fact that all of this needed to be clarified and cleared up in the first place was a little bit of a worry. The next point that I kind of want to make here is that Corvus Belli, they're a Spanish company, they have Spanish employees, the designers are Spanish, and what they've got to do is translate their game into English a lot of the time. When I think of my own views when I'm reading a book or playing a computer game or something, and I know I have this awareness that there's also a non-English version out there for other consumers, I kind of don't really care. And I kind of sort of think of it as an afterthought that, gosh, if they're having some problem that's caused by a bad translation, like if they're reading the book and they don't understand this part, or it didn't make sense, or it was ruined for them somehow, my initial gut feeling is like, I'm an English person, I don't really care. But it's a pretty terrible way of looking at it. And if you're Corvus Belli, you must also know that most of the people who play your game actually don't speak Spanish, rely on the English version. And one thing we saw a while back was this thing with the decapitation mission too, where everybody was playing decapitation with a different set of objective points, built into the actual mission. Where you do this, you get a certain number of objective points, whereas the Spanish version was different, and the Spanish version was actually correct and better, and a decent mission, whereas the English version was terrible. So we seem to have this recurring sort of theme of Corvus Belli, with the best intentions and in good faith and trying to make the best game they can, kind of dropping the ball on the translation front, where a huge number of players have their gaming experience a little bit limited, shall we say, or a little bit set back. There's another way of putting it. I'm trying to sort of beat around the bush here. When you feel like that shouldn't really need to be the case. We're in a world where surely that's the kind of thing that could be done a lot better. Just coming back to the rules for a moment, let's just have a look at some of that wording. So Deschart Company, let's have a look at Father Lucian Sforza. So wildcard character says Sforza FTO can be part of any fireteam of this sectorial. So the wording of can be part of it. So you read that as an English speaker and go, right, doesn't matter what the link team is, could be Zuyongs, could be Gulams, could be whatever, he can join it, so you can add him to your link team. So you got 4 Gulams and you have a Sforza. Then there's the units which say this model can join something else, and where it says join, it specifies a team. So that's similar to a wild card, but only to a particular type of unit. So you can't add your Ruishi to a group of Gulams, for example, and that's fairly transparent and understandable from the actual wording of it. And then you've got some models. I'll find the OSS sectorial for this example. Then you've got some examples where it's like, okay, Shakti, for example, Shakti counts as a Yadu trooper for fireteam composition, and this is the case for a lot of the Diaphos as well. So with the way that all of these models have similar but different rules, and they rely on the language of it for you to determine what's actually possible, good translation is very important, and sometimes clarification is really, really important as well. So yeah, my message to Corvus Belli around that would definitely be, try and listen to the community as much as possible, try and fix things as quickly as possible, and try to be very careful when it comes to, language and what people's go-to reactions are going to be from that. So I hope I've kind of covered, that particular topic and given you, for those of you not familiar with it, as a little bit of a rundown on this thread so that you don't have to read it yourself. There are some real detractors in this this rules forum, and some people who are genuinely constructive, but I think we can move past that. The next thing I want to generally talk about is what the game is actually like, or what it could be like, and whether these particular rules are sound and balanced and good for the game. And one thing I want to say first up with this side of the topic is that I enjoy going onto Army 6 and building lists almost as much as I enjoy playing the game. Just love it. So on my way home from work on the train or wherever it might be, or when I'm just waiting for something, I'll have my phone out and I might be going through and making lists just for fun. It's a great way to upskill yourself at the game, to study the game, to get better at the game, and to just enjoy yourself. And more versatile link teams and more link team options just generally make that a better experience. You've got more options, you've got more freedom. It also makes sense from a thematic perspective that you have powerful units able to lead weaker units, and they mix and match. If you're on the battlefield, the best thing for victory is sticking together and working as a team, so you'd expect to see troopers working in tandem with each other rather than running off being solos more often than not, so that actually makes sense from that perspective. And I also like to think of special characters, having a retinue, like a cohort, bodyguards, that kind of thing. So you got Father Lucian Sforza bowling down the street with his bounty hunter crew, for example, or your crane rank with your subordinate Celestial Guards, or your Celestial Guard with your Quangshis that you have under your control. That's really cool, and that really is quite charismatic and is very easy to imagine. It captures your imagination very well. The side of it that I don't really like is that what Corvus Belli have ended up doing more recently is they've been giving the advantage of those rules to some sectorials but not others. So if we come right back to the start of the video where I described how, yes, it's cool to make a fireteam core of Alguaciles, and yes, it can be kind of good to make a fireteam core of Mobile Regardias, neither of those two options are nearly as good, in my view, as that third option where you've got the cheap cheerleaders mixed in with that more expensive power trooper, and they're supporting him, and because they didn't need to do any work anyway, they may as well be as cheap as possible so you can afford all of those other units in your list, your Intruder or your Hellcat or whatever it might be. So the more that kind of thing is available to you, the better it is for your sectorial, and the strongest your sectorial is going to be, and the more capability it's going to have. So with that in mind, if we look at sectorials that aren't able to do that as well, that's a deficit. And if we look at sectorials which can do that very, very well, that's, maybe a bit of power creep. And power creep, I think, is the correct word to be using for their most recent book, Daedalus Falls, and maybe even for the previous one before that. Why is it that, for example, Shazvasti can have Shishkin, Fatality Level 2, as a wild card, joining any link team that she wants, and that Rama Task Force can have Tariq as a wild card, able to join any link team that he wants. But you come over to, say, Joan of Arc, who doesn't have Fatality Level 2, for example. She's a powerful trooper, and she can join a ball-busting group of knights. But she can't be part of, say, a group of order sergeants, for example. Would that be too powerful? Well, if you think that's too powerful, what do you think about, Shishkin and Tariq being linkable? It doesn't seem to make sense, does it? So what seems to be happening is you've got Corvus Belli sort of haphazardly and at random, it feels like at random, doling out that capability, to a couple of new sectorials without bringing some of the older ones up to speed at the same time, which seems a little bit naff to me. We look at a sectorial like Deshat Company, which has amazing, capability because of the ability to have the super cheap but yet effective bounty hunters in tandem with the Zuyongs, which are still kind of cheap but pack a huge punch in that link team, and are still able to have the utility of that Rushi backed up by all of that, that link bonus, and with MSV2, assisted fire, that kind of thing. And then you look at maybe other sectorials that just can't really do that to that same effect. We might look at Starco or Druze, for example, which don't really have that same kind of capability. With Druze, yeah, you've got a little bit of mixing and matching, but you don't really have a lot of wildcarding. I mean, Arslan, not a very good character, and he can really only join Druze anyway. If you make a Druze shock team, you can have like a brawler or a clipper Dron bot, which doesn't really help them out that much. Whereas if you did have a very, very powerful character like the ones we mentioned, at Joan level or at Tariq level or Shishkin level or whatever it may be, able to join them, suddenly that Link team would look a lot scary, and the faction would be a lot more, a lot more powerful. Druze, in my opinion, are at the absolute bottom of the pile in infiNity. That's right down the bottom. This is subjective, of course, but I've got some reasons to back it up. And just within NA2, I think Deshat Company are the most powerful, whereas Druze are the least powerful, and it has a lot to do with the capability they have because of Wildcard, because of mix and match link teams. So I still want it to be possible for Wildcards to be out there, and for mix and match link teams to be out there, but I'd want it to be spread more evenly across all of the sectorials of the game. And I'd like it to, at least be held in check a little bit, rather than saying, okay, you can have heaps of bounty hunters and they can go join any teams whatsoever. Maybe start to limit it a bit, rather than having 5 different models all part of the same link, except in special cases. Maybe sort of limit that a bit so that you've generally got a theme in your link, like maybe at least 2 or 3 of models of the link should be the same type. I'm not really sure. I do kind of like the foreign company A team. Maybe that's a good exception, specifically because this particular link team's actually not the most powerful thing in the world. But if there was generally a rule where you had to comprise your link team of at least several models of the same type, and that has to be the core model that everybody else is joining. For example, in the Deshat example, if the rule was, okay, yes, you can have a Rushi in there, yes, you can have bounty hunters in there, yes, you can have Lucian Sforza in there, but if you're going to go down that path, you've got to start out with, say, at least three Zuyongs. That would suddenly bring the power level of Deshat down to something which is a bit more reasonable and sensible, because there's a downside to it. You've actually got to give something up and pay a bit of a price there. You've got to comprise your link team of 3 relatively expensive members. So we just grab and it's still a very powerful link team. Let's say we go 3 tactical awareness guys, and this is still a great link team. But let's say that the rule was you have to put the 3 Zuyongs in there, then you can add a Rushi, and then you can add a brawler, and not a brawler, a bounty hunter. And that just makes a bit more sense to me, because in the theme of the game, you're still looking at and playing with what feels like and looks like a Zuyong link team that are being backed up by some specialists, right? Some, not specialists in the sense of button pressing, but specialized units that have a special role, for example, in infiNity. So I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, the way they've done it has left a lot of people sort of a little bit disappointed, and I think one thing this game could benefit from, maybe in a new edition, is just a bit of a revamp of all the sectorials, and generally trying to keep things fairly even in terms of what's possible, and try not to go too overboard of it. We need moderation, guys. I think we need things in a nice even, manageable amount. But we wouldn't want to get rid of wildcards and specialization and mix and match link teams altogether. I have said that a few times already in this video, and I'm going to stick with that. But yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to cover with this. Again, Helloos, we love you. If you're listening, thanks for chipping in and commenting on that rules thread. In future, I think it just generally would be better if there's a big outlying unresolved issue that a team of people gets together and an errata or FAQ comes out as quickly as possible, or a general statement's made out of it, and a very comprehensive statement that researches the whole thing first and then makes a big post. That would be the better way of doing it. And just obviously be very careful with interviews on podcasts and things where, people are going to hang on your every word. And if you are a representative of the company, people are going to, use comments as authoritative for their rules discussions. And that's just how it's going to go. So just be mindful of that, I guess, is the communication there. I'm not saying that Corvus Belli as a company just aren't that are. I mean, probably 99% of the time they're actually avoiding a lot of issues by being mindful of that already. But again, I don't think it can be said enough. It's something which needs just to be reiterated and reminded of all the time. But yeah, Fireteam core, link team, wildcard rules. I think that everybody can feel a bit more comfortable about this issue now that we've all had a good talk about it and that some things have been resolved. I'm going to be going back to playing to Shark Company, of course, and hey, I was going to be including a Zuyong in every link team anyway, so it wouldn't have affected me either way, but it's good to know what's what. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.